want to talk a little bit today about a phenomenon I noticed within myself, a reaction that I have to something that I thought was interesting and telling. So context being, my brother sent me a podcast recently. I think it's called What Would Your Shrink Say? And it's two guys, two psychologists who kind of do a quick 15, 20-minute topic, conversation on a topic. And it could be things like people pleasing or, how emotions drive our decisions, all different topics. Really good podcast. I find it really interesting. Resonates with some of the things the way as I think and the concepts I talk about, different perspective on it. But I noticed as I was listening to one of them, this phenomenon, or this reaction that I have. And it happens with all sorts of different things. If I could be watching a show, I could be listening to a podcast, reading a book. And it's when I'm listening to something that's good, right? Good being like it's well thought out, it's insightful, it's relevant to a topic that I care about. And typically it might just be that, but typically there's another piece to it where either they're going deeper than I've gone, they're looking at it from another angle, they're adding to it in some way. There's something to that. And what I noticed is my reaction is negative. And it's an instinctual, like a subconscious maybe reaction in the way that I would say it, but I feel it, right? I've talked about this in other videos, like what does discomfort really feel like when in that way? And it's like somewhat in your stomach and in my head, and I feel somewhat defensive, and I feel myself starting to think about how I could, what's wrong with it? How can I attack it? How can I tear it down in some way? And it made me wonder, like, why am I doing that? This is seemingly a good thing. It's a good podcast. It's something interesting. It's a topic that's going to add to my thinking. And, really practicing what I preach, nothing should be viewed as negative. All inputs are good, particularly if it's relevant and it's well thought out. So logically, big L logically, there would seem to be no reason for me to be feeling that way. And again, the way in which that reaction manifested, it wasn't something that I'm thinking through. It's just happening. So I started thinking about, what's going on there. And it became apparent to me pretty quickly. Like there's some ego at play for sure. Of people possibly having a better idea than I have, and I think I still have some of that. There's a little bit of defensiveness and ego around that of like, oh, I thought I had that topic, and I thought I had the answer, but somebody else has it too. Like, oh shit. But probably more than that, related, but more than that, is this idea that we just like to have things be clean and easy and simple and neat and cohesive narratives and packages. And what this is doing is it's breaking that a little bit. If it's a topic, right, I mentioned in one of the episodes was on people pleasing. Let's just use that as an example. If that's a topic that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and I've made videos on it, and I've written about it, and I've formulated my working theory and view on what that is. When somebody adds to it, changes it, looks at it from another perspective, it forces me to do more work, right? It forces me to entertain the idea now of like, well, what are they saying? How does that fit in? And best case, right? I'll put best case in quotes. It fits into the story that I have, and it adds to it in some way. And it's almost a sense of relief then of like, oh, okay, this is okay. Like this fits into what I thought. This works. Great. No harm done here. But still, there's a little bit of work in that of making sure. Quote unquote worst case, which actually should be best case, is it counters it. It changes it. It proves it wrong, or it shows that actually it's a little bit different than how I thought it was. But that's the part that's work. And I guess in simple terms, it causes some discomfort. So that subconscious part of me is saying, I don't like that. I thought I had my arms around this thing. I thought I understood what it was, but now it's changing. And that's why that instinctual reaction, I think, kicks in of like, oh, I don't like this. Now, I've forced myself through that, right? There's a time in my life where I would literally turn something like that off, or I would become so defensive that I would become like cynical and jaded and start mocking it and tearing it down and just looking for reasons to say this is nonsense to make myself feel better and to not have to go through that exercise, right? Not feel the discomfort and feel like my story still holds. So I've gotten better at that now, where I muscle through it and I still listen and I try and get the benefits from it. But it's an interesting thing because it's just one of those personal reactions and phenomena that's so easy to overlook when you're constantly trying to assess. It's so easy to look outward and see where mistakes happen, but there's these blind spots that we don't always see. But also interesting because it's so relevant, right? It's so, you see these things we talk about in these videos all the time, where they pop up. These hidden ways in which they pop up, right? I spend hours and hours and hours a week talking about these topics and trying to think more logically and more rationally and be objective, and how important it is to take in additional inputs, and how the truth is the truth whether we like it or not. So if somebody gives a view that counters yours, you should be like, great, if that's true, awesome, I'd rather know that. Yet in all these little ways, right, if you're not actively on guard at all times, your subconscious or whatever it is sneaks in and you break bad. And you say, I don't like this podcast because it's challenging something, right? Even somebody like me who's so focused on it, it just goes to show, and I'm not trying to say I'm special, I'm just saying it's not enough to just be aware of it. It's not enough to just be thinking about it sometimes. It's a constant active thing that you have to be, I hesitate to say the word battling against, but you certainly have to be on guard for and looking for, and almost suspect that it's going to be happening, or at the least look for those instruments, look for those things like that reaction, that feeling in my gut, that defensiveness kicking in to say, hey, I don't know why yet, but I know something's going on here, so let me dig into it, which is what hopefully this video was.